Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last part, we took care of business over at Mount Pyre, and while Team Aqua ultimately got away with the blue orb, we at least have the red orb to do something with when we eventually find a way to use it. And then we went and explored a good chunk of Route 123 before finding ourselves at the Berry Master's house, and now we're raiding his very large garden of every berry he's got. There's a lot of berries here that I actively don't even remember the abilities of some of them. But we're actively speeding this footage up because grabbing all these berries took a total of 3 minutes. And given that that'd be about 10% of an average video this for how this LP's gone so far, I figured this would be a good choice for video pacing. The Berry Master's Garden is far and away the best place to plant any berries when it comes to trying to grow a lot of them, either to use as held items or as ingredients for the Pokeblocks when you do the Contest Spectacular adjacent stuff. But for this LP in specific, I'm grabbing all these berries and then promptly forgetting them all, really, because I don't really use them as held items basically ever across the LP. With that said, now that we finished that on Route 123, if we actively head west, we're going to find ourselves back towards where we first met Latias, like I mentioned. So we've actively looped around Fortree entirely at this point. Now, while our next story objective is to head over to Slateport and stop Team Aqua in that direction, I'm going to eschew progress just a little bit still to actively finish off exploring Route 123, and I fly to Fortree to get back to Mount Pyre from there. But again, you can actively just fly to any route in Mount Pyre in the game. It's just that I often forget that's a thing you can do in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire to begin with. Probably largely helped because this is the last game in the series up to this point where Fly works in the way it has since Gen 1. Future games radically change how Fly works as an HM outside of the field, if it's even technically an HM for use outside of battle to begin with. But right now, our first new Pokemon on the part is Rhyhorn, a Gen 1 ground rock type, so it's weak to fighting, ground, steel, water, grass, and ice, but immune to electric, water and grass being 4 times weaknesses. For a Gen 1 Pokemon, this is a pretty good starting state with decent physical defense and okay physical attack on top of that, but if you go out of the way to evolve it just to the state it had in Gen 1, you get a really good physically minded Pokemon with good attack, defense, and HP. But notably, it did get another evolution in Gen 4 that made it even better at that specialty. We also got another new Pokemon here. This is Tropius. This is the flying grass type Pokemon we can find back on Route 119. Flying grass means it's weak to flying, poison, rock, fire, and ice, but immune to ground, ice being a 4 times weakness. Tropius is an interesting design, and it is a decently defensively minded Pokemon, but I remember its learn set and typing just not being very kind to it. Ability-wise for those two Pokemon, Rhyhorn can get Lightning Rod, Rock Head, or Reckless. I think the only one of those we haven't talked about yet is Reckless, where if a move does recoil damage, its power is increased by some percent. I forget off the top of my head. Meanwhile, Tropius' abilities can be Chlorophyll, Solar Power, or Harvest. I don't think we've talked about Solar Power or Harvest yet. Solar Power, I believe, when there's a Sunshine weather state active, the Pokemon that has that ability's special attack is boosted, but their HP is lowered by some amount. Meanwhile, Harvest, if it uses a berry in battle, it can just restore it at the end of any given turn. With that said, time for something a little new that we haven't seen yet. This is a Horde battle. This is a 5v1 battle type that's relatively rare. I think it's like a 5% chance to happen normally. But using either honey as an item or the sweet scent move from the party menu while in grass can prompt one of these immediately. The big thing with Horde battles is not only is it a 5v1, but the Pokemon are usually a lower level or even lower evolution variation of the Pokemon that you can find in that route. For instance, most Shuppets you'll find around here on Route 123 are not level 15, but these ones are because we're encountering 5 of them. There's 2 main reasons you might want to initiate a Horde battle intentionally. For one thing, there's some Pokemon on certain routes that can only be found in Hordes. But also, Pokemon in Horde battles are more likely to have their hidden ability than ones found in the wild. So if you're trying to actively find a hidden ability for a Pokemon that you like the look of, that's the way to go there. But on top of that, and I'm future me, do a little bit of actual research into this. I swear I remember hearing at some point that Horde battles are more likely to have a shiny Pokemon in them, but that might be just something to do with like shiny chaining and all that, which I still don't fully understand because I don't shiny farm myself. In fact, I don't even think I've talked about shinies up to now. But I'll talk about them after we talk about Ninetales here. This is a Gen 1 pure fire type, so it's weak to ground, rock, and water. Ninetales evolves from Vulpix, the Pokemon I mentioned you can find over in Mount Pyre if you use a Firestone on it. Ninetales is a really good special defender with a good speed stat on top of that, and it makes her a really good fire type. In most cases, really, it's not the strongest attacker with the type, but it doesn't matter as much because you're using it as a defender at the end of the day anyway. And now it's already time for our next new Pokemon. This is Blossom. This evolves from Gloom if you use a Sunstone on it, so now we've seen the entire Oddish line. Pure Grass type, so it's weak to Flying, Poison, Bug, Fire, and Ice. This is the more defensively minded version of the Oddish line's ending. And while I think it's definitely cuter, I just don't find it as fun to use as a Vileplume in the case I'm actively using a Grass type and I choose to use the Oddish line. From memory, both Pokemon do have good learn sets, but I want to say Ninetales is probably stronger on the whole with that, but it's been a while since I looked too deeply into either of those. Ability-wise, Blossom can either have Chlorophyll or Healer. I don't think we've talked about Healer yet. Healer just gives a flat chance of curing a teammate's status ailment in a battle. Meanwhile, Ninetales can have Flash Fire or Drought. Flash Fire powers up its fire-type moves if it's hit by one. So in the case something's recklessly using fire against that, that can just make it stronger. Meanwhile, Drought is effectively a natural sunny day when you throw out the Ninetales. So you throw it out and it'll summon harsh sunlight, thus further powering up its fire-type moves. And also weakening water-type moves. I honestly kind of prefer Drought on a Ninetales myself, if only because that technically lasts longer and is guaranteed to happen, rather than the chance of getting hit by fire-type attacks, but honestly, both are perfectly fine, and both are perfectly usable abilities for a decent fire-type on the whole. With that said, the end is in sight. We're almost done here on Route 123. The main thing at the end of the northern half of the route is that little hut we see there, as well as a lake nearby it with a bunch of fisherman-type Pokemon trainers. There's a couple of items we can get here, but there's one that's a little more important for what I'm trying to get done in this LP on the whole. Funnily enough, though, both items you can get here has nothing to do with the person who actively owns the shop. It's the customer and the pet we actually want to investigate here. Play along with an old man, would you? Tell me which Pokemon you like best. I like Gyarados more. Ah, but thou must. Oh, exactly, you get it, don't you? I'll have to give you something special I've been holding on to. Here we get an Eviolite. This is a really good held item, especially if you actively have the evolution of Duskull on your team. That there will boost the defense and special defense of a Pokemon who can still evolve. I'll have my precious Magikarp hold one. So that does what it says in the tin. If you have that on a Pokemon that still can evolve, they get a massive boost to their defenses on the whole. I forget the exact math of it. Future me will probably put that on screen. But it's a pretty good way to get around certain evolutions in the case you either have a trait evolution you can't hit or something like that. That makes them much more mindable in an endgame or postgame type scenario. And scratching that Poochyena, though, gives us the Gyarados-ite, so now we can Mega Evolve a Gyarados, which I will talk about after we talk about the next new Pokemon. This specific trainer is going to be throwing out a Whiscash, or Whiscash. I always do Whiscash for some reason. This evolves from Barboach at level 30. It's still a water ground type, so it's weak to grass, immune to electric, grass being a 4x weakness. Whiscash has a really good HP stat, and while none of the rest of its stats are super standout, they're still incredibly usable. Whiscash can either get Oblivious, Anticipation, or Hydration for its abilities. We've talked about Oblivious before. I think we've talked about Anticipation before as well, where it senses certain moves. Hydration will heal status ailments in the case it's raining, which can be pretty useful. Perfectly usable water-type line. Not one I tend to go for myself, but I've had playthroughs where I've been like, yeah, if I want to do something a little different, I'll probably use that. So, Mega Gyarados. In Mega Evolving, Gyarados loses either Intimidate or Moxie to get Mold Breaker instead, which is actually a really good boost. What Mold Breaker does is that when a Pokemon with that ability attacks an opponent, the opponent's ability is ignored when it comes to any kind of damage calculations. One of the most famous cases of this is if a Pokemon with Mold Breaker uses Earthquake on a Pokemon with Levitate, Levitate will be ignored and Earthquake will hit. Yes, indeed, and that's why we intend to move ahead with our expedition. That's wonderful, Captain Stern. Thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to talk to us. We hope we can interview you again with news of more discoveries. Oh, that's my first time being filmed for TV. What a nerve-wracking experience. Oh, it's you again. You're looking well. Glad to see it. We made a huge discovery on our latest expedition to the seafloor. We found an underwater cabin on Route 128, and we think it may be the den of a super ancient Pokemon long thought to have been extinct.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I hope you're listening out there, Captain Stern. We at Team Aqua will now be assuming control of your lovely submarine. You'll contribute to our great plan of returning everything to the beginning. I hope you appreciate this great honor.
Do you hear that voice? Sounds like someone's using a megaphone. But where is it coming from? It came from the harbor. Our submarine, they took it. Young man, I'm sorry, but please, come with me. I mean, we kind of had a feeling this would happen, considering that's exactly what they came here to do, but oh well. Those thugs. They're the same lot who tried to take the Devon parts at the museum. Impossible! You actually followed us all the way from Mount Pyre. You got me. I bow to your persistence and love of justice. It's a pity, so it is, but we're well past the time when you and your best efforts can turn the tide. We'll add a few last touches to this submarine and we'll be all set to bust open the seafloor cavern and where the great Pokemon's sleeping. Our plan is to return everything to the beginning. They're as good as complete. But I know you gotta do what you gotta do, Scamp. I'm not gonna tell you to quit chasing us. Follow us all the way to our hideout in Lilycove if that's what your honor demands. Now then, Shelly. Got it. You guys, keep that spoiled brat busy until the submarine takes off. Aye aye, ma'am. Let's go, Archie. Got it. We'll see you there then, my little scamp adversary. Is this a bad time to tell you I actually can't swim? I can fight like Poseidon even on land! That implies that Greece is a thing in this world, and we've yet to actively see that. But that also means that Greek mythology exists, which... that opens up a couple of questions about things. Poseidon's not so good at battles on land. What a pathetic man. I'm the 26th strongest Team Aqua Grunt. Leave this to me. I mentioned before that you guys get really granular with that, but I feel like at a certain point, it's not worth keeping track of things because it either makes you guys look a little sad or really weirdly too organized in a way that you're putting way too much focus onto. At this point, you're used to Team Aqua Grunts. You know what to relatively expect. A good Psychic type and Grass type can go a long way here, and that's why Gardevoir is especially really good here. I'm the 26th strongest Team Aqua Grunt, but I lost! Mission complete! I'm gonna check out the modified sub in our hideout. I'm psyched to see all the modding on the sub. Modding? Those criminals. What are they planning to do with my Submarine Explorer 1? They can't be. They can't be after that super ancient Pokemon that slumbers at the bottom of the sea. Kyle, I'm sorry, but my stolen submarine. It can bring an unimaginable disaster upon the world. Someone has to get to their hideout in Lilycove and stop them. But I've got no chance alone. Kyle, please, may I ask for your help? I can at least get you as far as Lilycove, where their hideout is. Do you think you and your Pokemon could put a stop to them and save my sub from being used for evil? Please! Sure. Thank you. We'll launch it once. Actively doing this with Captain Stern actively gives you a fast travel over to Lilycove, even if you haven't been there before, which is really nice. Mind you, we've gotten pretty close to here as it is. We've arrived in Lilycove City. Those thieves who stole my submarine must be hiding somewhere in the city. Kyle, please, find my sub for me. I'll be heading back to the shipyard in Slateport and start dealing with the aftermath of all this. Lilycove in specific is the route just due east of where we originally forked south to go see Mount Pyre. And honestly, if memory serves, you can just head over here first in the case you wanted to. I think that's why they added the Nurse Joy over near where Mount Pyre is, just as a way to give you an easy way to recover without going all the way over here, but at the same time, it's such a short route, it does feel a little bit extraneous. But I will say that's probably one of the few Nurse Joys I'll actively defend, or the extra healing points rather, I'll actively defend the placement of. Now, there's a whole lot for us to do here in Lilycove, but I'm actively going to head back to Route 110 really quick and move around from there, as there's a couple of other things I want to get done before we actively head on with plot. Namely, for one thing, I do want to showcase the rest of Route 122, but also there's another trick room we can take care of at this point. Let's see. Huh? How'd you know I concealed myself inside this window? You're sharp. You've come to challenge my trick house, haven't you? That's why you're here, isn't it? Yes, it is. Consider your challenge accepted. Enter through the scroll there. Let your challenge commence. I shall be waiting in the back. What is this, our 4th total challenge at the trick house? 3rd? I've lost track at this point a little bit, honestly. I won't lie. With that said, I do think this is the hardest of the trick room layouts here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. It's just a giant strength maze. You need to push the rocks in certain directions to open up routes, but not block off too many routes for later on if you want to grab all the items. The thing is with strength puzzles in areas like this, I actively do recommend having an escape room on hand, because I think there are ways to get yourself into a scenario where you're kind of stuck, and that's no good. The big thing with strength rooms like this that can be kind of annoying is, since you, without maps, don't have a full picture of what the area looks like, it's very easy to accidentally move a rock into a placement that actively helps you in the brief moment that you're in, but long-term blockades your access to an item or some progress and all that. So there's a little bit of trial and error involved in rooms like this usually. With that said, while I think this is probably the hardest strength puzzle in this game, that's also because there's not too many of them. I'm trying to think what off the top of my head is probably the hardest strength puzzle I can think of in the series. My first thought went to Gen 4. There's probably something over in Mount Coronet in Sinnoh that was an annoyance to me as a child in some form, but it's been long enough that I actually don't remember, as I've talked about several times up to this point. With that said, like prior Trick House variants, we're of course getting some specific use items in here. In this case, we're getting Castelia cones. Like with a lot of the other Trick House rooms we've done, that's effectively another regional variant of a lava cookie that'll heal all non-volatile status ailments. In specific, that is the one for Unova, which honestly has always been my favorite of those, just look-wise. I don't know why. It's weird, because I'm not even, like, that big on eating ice cream cones. There's something about the cold that often sets off my brain in a way I don't like. But something about the Castelia cones has always just looked really tasty, in a way that I do not know how to easily parse. And notably, I actively did screw up here, so I actively have to start the puzzle over, but since I got the item anyway, I at least can streamline things for the next attempt here. I don't know why, something about these 3 rocks up here at the top right of the area always just messes with me. And I think it's because I can just walk around that rock like that. For some reason, that's just not in my brain as much. I think a big thing is with this specific entry is that I want to say at the top of my head, this is one of the few, if not the only, entry where the strength rocks are 2x2 in size rather than 1x1. And maybe that little extra layer just messes with me a good bit. Because most of the other games, the strength rocks are always a 1x1. At the end of the day, it's not the biggest problem, though, because there's just not that many strength puzzles here in Hoenn to begin with, really. Alright, Trickmaster, that's another trick room down. What do you have to say this time? We're catching up to you in your greatness places. Ah, you've made it this far. Your shop took me all night to bring in those boulders. You're almost my equal in greatness. Great, you've earned this reward. The smoke ball is probably one of the lesser rewards for me specifically that the Trickmaster can give you. What the smoke ball does is that if you have a Pokemon hold it and they're in battle, you are guaranteed to be able to flee if you choose that option, even if there's abilities in place like Arena Trap that would otherwise prevent you from actively leaving the battle. Since I don't tend to run from many random battles as it is, not exactly something I find very useful. With that said, we're now back on Route 121 over near Mount Pyre, and now we've actively found Hoenn's Safari Zone. This area got radically changed up here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Before we get into the specifics there, though, worth noting this specific NPC can give you the TM for Dream Eater, which can only be used on sleeping Pokemon, but it'll actively take half the damage you deal to them with it and restore it into the Pokemon that use Dream Eater's health, which in some cases can be a real game changer. I know there's entire strategies involving just sleeping in some form in the series. Either being able to inflict sleep on things and then deal damage to them more specifically that way, or falling asleep yourself and then using things like Snore to do massive damage. So, the Safari Zone has notably been changed up pretty well for Gen 6 here. Most notably, in the original version of the Safari Zone in Gen 3, you had the same mechanics as you did in the Kanto one. You paid to enter, you had a certain amount of steps you could walk around in there, and you couldn't use your actual Pokemon. You either had to just throw a Safari Ball, throw a rock, or throw bait to either make them more likely to flee but easier to catch, or less likely to flee but harder to catch. On top of that, there's also a lot of pathways in here that need either the Acro or Mach Bike to get around. Heck, there's one specific item we can't grab until we have the ability to actively have both. I'm mostly in here for the items right now, as there are a couple of key ones we can grab. Hyper specifically, some TMs, some of which I actively can't get until later or until I swap my bike type. And even a Mega Stone for a Pokemon we've already seen. You can get the Absolite in here somewhere along the line. But for right now, let's talk about the Pokemon you can find here, because there's a whole lot here, and there's some we haven't even gotten to talk about yet. First off to note, the Safari Zone is actively divided into 4 subdomains that have their own set of Pokemon. There's Area 1, which is where the entrance is, Area 2, which is the quarter to the west of that, Area 3, which is north of the entrance, and then the northwestern area is Area 4. Notably, Emerald also had an Area 5 and 6 due east of the entrance and northeast of it, but because Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are almost entirely based off of Ruby and Sapphire versus Emerald, we are back down to the base 4 areas. In Area 1, ignoring certain Pokemon we're actively going to run into while we're here. In the normal grass, you can run into Gloom and Doduos. In the long grass, you can run into Gloom, Doduos, and Giraffarigs. You can run into horde encounters of Oddishes and Doduos. Surfing, you can run into one of the 2 Pokemon we're actively going to find in here that we haven't seen yet. And if you fish with the old rod, you'll find Goldines and Magikarps. With the good rod, you'll find Goldines and Magikarps as well. But you can actively find Sea Kings when you get the 3rd tier fishing rod here. In Area 2, most of the Pokemon in normal grass are the same. Gloom's one of the 2 Pokemon we're going to run into, and Doduos. But you can also find Zatus there. On the long grass in Area 2, you can find Glooms, Doduos, and Wobbuffets. Horde encounters are the same, largely, as are the fishing and surfing Pokemon. In Area 3, the 4th standard grass slot is now Rhyhorns. The long grass slot is now Heracrosses. There's nothing new in horde encounters over there, neither with anything in the water. In Area 4, you can actually find Donphans pretty rarely in the standard grass. Pincers in the long grass, which I remember distinctly playing Emerald at a Panera Bread, like I believe I brought up earlier in the LP, and doing stuff here in the Safari Zone, and it was mostly me trying to find a Pinsir just because I thought the Pokemon looked cool. I don't even think I used it. I just spent a lot of time trying to find it because I thought it looked neat. And largely, outside of a certain mechanic shift down the line we haven't gotten to, that's all the Pokemon you can find here that we haven't actively found. Outside of 2 specific ones that are in a lot of the long grass and all that, because we're going to run into them momentarily. I do come back to this area later on to grab items I miss along the way, but that's because I kind of just do that throughout the area to begin with once I get an ability that's very specific to make getting around pretty quickly here in Hoenn. But that's for the end game portion of the LP, effectively, so we'll see that way down the line. If memory serves, I do recall some people being kind of disappointed that the Safari Zone effectively just became another standard area here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, rather than it having that little mini-game aesthetic and feel to it. I don't mind too much myself because I always just found doing the standard Safari Zone thing annoying, but I get why. Either way, first new Pokemon here is Pikachu, this series mascot. We all know and love Pikachu at this point. We're also probably very tired of him. Pure electric type, so it's weak to ground. It's a decently fast mixed attacker on the whole, but if you're going to use one, I'd actively recommend evolving it, unlike a certain former other mascot of the series, as its evolution upon using a Thunderstone is a much faster mixed attacker that I really do like using. Albeit, I do prefer using its regional variant over in Alola in my personal preference. And the next new Pokemon, and the final one for the part, is the Generation 1 Psyduck. Pure water type, so it's weak to electric and grass. Psyduck, as it is, doesn't seem like that standout Pokemon. It's got a decent special attack stat for a first stage, but nothing really otherwise that good about it. But if you evolve it while it doesn't gain a subtype, it actively does boost up its stats a good bit and becomes an okay special attacker. But there's just Pokemon that do better at that universally in the water type, I find. It has a decent learn set because I think it can also get some good Psychic type moves later on in its leveling curve. But while I do love Psyduck dearly because of just always pitying the poor little thing in the anime, it's not a Pokemon I've used too many times. I think I've maybe used a Psyduck in its evolution 3 or 4 times over the years, but in some of those times I don't even think I used them for the entire playthrough. I think they were more a stopgap Pokemon, like how I treated Magna earlier in the LP. Though I should note, I will admit that I think the Pokemon variety here, at least for right now, it will change a little bit later on, is worse than it was even in Vanilla, Ruby, and Sapphire. Emerald overall, when it came to Pokemon variety, had the best bet of that Safari Zone. Mind you, I'm trying to think, when it comes to the Safari Zones in general, what do I think is probably the most useful one for finding some pretty out-there Pokemon? It's been a while since I went through Sinnoh's, so I don't quite remember that. All I remember about that one is the snail Pokemon being all over the place and annoying the hell out of me. My first thought's actually the one they added to Johto in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. That one had a lot of really cool Pokemon you can get decently early in that. Helps that some of those are ones that were in the original Gold, Silver, and Crystal, but you had to wait until the latter half of the game to get. And you know when I say latter half, I don't mean the latter half of Johto. You know what I mean. And man, that made getting Pokemon teams a little more interesting overall in HGSS. The Friend Safaris, I think you can get some decent Mon out of that back in Kalos, but that's a little bit different than the Safari Zone as it is. Gen 5, I don't remember having a Safari Zone in any regard. That's really the first time they really started stepping away from that general format. But then again, Gen 5 in general was just a big format shift for a lot of things in the series. Largely for the better in my interests, at least. But I understand some people's disappointment with Gen 5 and what it caused the series to slowly more evolve into, especially by the time you hit Gen 6 on. Once we grab those, I think those are Nanab berries down here, as well as a hidden item directly to their south. Hello there, Max Revive, I'll take that. We're now at the end of Route 121, so we've actually now reached Lilycove properly. Now, if it wasn't for the fact I wanted to get that trick house done, I probably would have just actively headed west from Lilycove to showcase the Safari Zone. But because I wanted to get a trick house thing done just to help weed down the amount of those we have left to do in the game, figured I might as well come from where we already knew where we were on Route 121, coming from Mount Pyre, just to give a better leap out point. So now let's actively do some things in Lilycove properly. Mind you, I say that, worth noting, in this part we actively don't go further north than the staircase directly next to the Pokemon Center. We're focusing on lower Lilycove today, effectively, as I want to do everything else tied to this town more next time. The most important thing is that there's a couple of TMs, and especially even a Mega Stone you can grab here, assuming you have the way to grab that Mega Stone, which I currently don't in my party, though I think at this point I've actually caught a Pokemon that can lead us over to that. This girl here is a little bit interesting. I don't quite get the point of her. What she does is that she'll tell you where you first met the Pokemon you show her, which I find odd because that's in a Pokemon summary anyway. I'm assuming that's maybe a way to help the game check for illegitimate Pokemon or something like that, because otherwise it just feels weirdly redundant. So this NPC here, he's the one that has a Mega Stone we can get, but to get it, we need to show him the Pokemon Lizia has on her Contest Spectacular teams. Most notably, the Pokemon we saw her with all the way back in our first trip to Slateport, and what was that, like part 6 or so, something like that? You need to show him in Altaria, which, if you actively grabbed a Swablu and have it on your team, by this point it more than likely is, so you will get the Altaria Knight. But for right now, I don't have access to it, and even then, there's a place I'm going to talk about Mega Altaria very specifically later on as it is. With that said, I'd recommend getting that Mega Stone if you have an Altaria on your team, because it's one of the better Megas in my eyes as it is, which is already funny considering most Megas are already really good in their stats. Oh, I just realized I never went over the stat changes that Mega Gyarados gets, but honestly, given how late we are into the video, I think I'll just leave that for future me to splice into the video at the point when it was actively relevant. This area here is a little interesting. This is the Cove Lily Motel. There's nothing to do here at the moment. In post-game, a whole slew of NPCs shows up here that I probably actively should show off in the LP because I didn't actively record that up to this point. If there's any reason I'll actively go record the things I said I might record once the LP's closer to completion, I'll probably go back and actively do that. Because it is a neat little thing. It's a little bit of a recurring Easter egg of sorts that's been around since Gen 1 over in Celadon. Also notably, this is where the 4th and final contest hall is, where in the original Ruby and Sapphire you could tackle the Master Rank contests. Though notably, in Pokemon Emerald, this is the only contest hall, so if you want to actively do anything with contests in Emerald, You're waiting past 6 gym badges, which I'm kind of torn on, I won't lie. I do prefer having all the contests available in one place, and I think Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire do make the right move by having all 4 contest halls have all 4 ranks accessible in them when you actively do anything with that mode. But waiting until 3/4 of the way through the campaign just about to do that, I feel that's a little bit weird for the amount of mechanics and thoughts that are put into a contest team setup. Ultimately, I'd say it's pretty harmless if you're just worrying about the campaign because you're probably not going to mess with it too much anyway, but it is definitely a little weird. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 19, we're going to fully explore Lilycove before heading on over to the Team Aqua base. See you guys then.